Welcome back, everybody. Here we are at the Icon International Photography Awards Critique Sessions, sponsored by B&H, and we're very, very grateful to B&H for all that they do for us. The support that they've given us is absolutely incredible. And also Critiq, that's Critiq without a U or an E, who are behind some of the software that gives you the opportunity to look at some of the images that were entered into the awards and the criticism. We're not looking for criticism, we're looking for feedback that was given by some of our judges online, which is something you can access. Just go to the Icon Awards website and you'll be able to find that. This morning, I'm joined by two incredibly talented photographers and also, I would like to say, very good friends. Kelly Brown from Australia and Michael Novo from the US. Kelly's out of Queensland and Michael's out of Chicago, Illinois. Guys, say hello to the audience and tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I am excited to be here. This is a new process for us and something I feel like you are going to love and get a lot out of. It's been 4 years since I've been back at WPPI, and I can tell you it's been a ride and I've missed it. So it's exciting to be here, and I feel honored to be able to share as much information as I can possibly give with all of you who have submitted your images.
Yeah, Michael Novo from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm absolutely excited for this process. And even though we've never done it before, I'm so much looking forward to it. And a big part of it is because for a very long time, I've lived in that 75 to 79 range, and you sometimes hear a comment, but there's not this in-depth discussion. So I'm really excited to at least give back to others. So looking forward to it.
Now, you may or may not notice that I'm not going to refer to dates and years, because one of the beauties of this process is that it's evergreen. What we're giving you is information that will go this year, next year, the year after, and so on. And these critiques will be available going forward. So it's almost like a legacy project. Really like what you said there, Michael. That was a very good point, because I think all of us at some point have been sort of in that little region, and we sit there and we're going, how do you get out of that 70, 75, 79 bracket and start not just popping into the award, but getting in there consistently, you know? What's your comment on that, Kelly? Like, you know what Michael was saying. I thought it was a very pertinent point.
I do. It was 2012. I entered WPPI print competition for the first time, and I entered 3 prints, and I got 180, but I did get a 77 and a 79. So I did sit in that area for quite a period of time. But if it wasn't coming to the judging, and if it wasn't for listening to the judges and their feedback and their comments, not just on my photographs, but on every other entrance photographs, I wouldn't have been able to get out of that scoring range and be able to push myself to reach a higher, what you like to refer to as our average, print average. When we submit our photos, we want to try and improve on our average score every year. And I think that's why that bench just continually gets risen, you know, that little bit higher each year, and you start to see work coming through. Michael and I were sitting on the judging panel, and we were just gobsmacked at the talent that was coming through. And for those of you that are watching online, you know, you don't have the opportunity to walk the gallery and look at these prints and see the detail and see what makes them, you know, the 80 to score 80 and above, or even just to become finalists here at the Icon Awards. So it is part of the experience, and it does take time. Like, it took me a long time to receive my Grandmaster Award 4 years ago. I think it didn't take me as long as some people, but it did take me a long time. So when I think about all the years that I've been entering, it's just a gradual process of just continually trying to improve your average score every year and learning from the feedback as much as you possibly can. It's hard sometimes to hear the feedback, because you think, oh, well, the judges don't understand what was going on at the time of the shoot and things like that. But you know what? We don't know. We can only judge what's in front of us. It's up to you as the photographer to be able to create a photograph that helps tell and portray the emotions, the story that you want to share. So you have to remember that when you're submitting. We aren't there at the time of the shoot, so you've got to give us as much as you possibly can and learn from that feedback, and not take it, you know, as a, you know, like as negative advice or someone's opinion, where we honestly here trying to help you as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, and it was years ago when I was speaking to a judge, and it was just a slew of 78s and 79s, and I was right there on the border, and they told me, the leap from that 75 to 79 into an 80 is a much wider gap than if I'm on a panel and I want to take you from an 84 to an 85. Because once you've broken that 80, now we can start discussing, and now you've got an image that's gallery worthy. But really, that like chasm almost that's between that 79 and 80 mark is really what you have to get over, and it truly felt like climbing a mountain for me.
I just, as you said that, I was just thinking that one of the things we also have to keep in mind is that the competition itself and the results should never define you. It's important that if you have great results, you celebrate them, but that's not what makes you a great photographer. In the same way that if you don't have a good result, that does not define you either. I had a very important lesson taught to me years ago when I entered an image in two competitions that were 3 weeks apart, both national print competitions, almost the same formats. And the one that was done first got a 58, which is to this day my lowest ever score, and happened to be the lowest score in the competition, which my friends took a lot of pleasure in reminding me of. But the same image 3 weeks later got an 89 and was one of the highest scoring prints in the other country's competition. So it was a good pointer that was a 30-point spread. So some people might say, well, what does that say about the judges? Well, what it says is all the judges are unique. So it's all feedback. There's no such thing as criticism, even though we use the word critique, it's feedback. And you take that on board and it lets you know, as Kelly said, your pictures have to express themselves. You're not there to hold their hand. So the scores are one way for you to get an understanding of what your pictures are saying. Use it as feedback if it's not telling the stories you want them to tell. All right, let's have a look at some of these pictures. Now, a reminder, we spent a couple of days looking at the finalists, the top 10 in every category, and they were images at number 1, had to score an 80 or higher. That is, they had to get an award. Then they had to be in the top 10. Today and tomorrow and yesterday, we're looking at a handful of images from certain categories that did not get an award, 79 or below. And our judges, Michael and Kelly, are going to give some understanding, open up the image and help us understand why they didn't get an award and what could have been done to lift them into that standard. We're going to be looking at maternity, a newborn baby, which is obviously why we have Michael here. You thought I'd say you, didn't you? and we're going to go backwards and forwards between the two. So let's get into this. Just have a question. Sorry.
And Mason, will they have an opportunity to submit?
Oh, okay. So the question was from the audience: do you have an opportunity to submit for critiques? You do, but not just by not. This is not a standalone event. This is part of the Icon Awards. So part of the Icon Awards was online judging with scores and honours. Part of the Icon International Photography Awards was an online critique app that you can download and go and look at. And I believe that'll be up in the next few days. And it's a public gallery. Well, yeah, evergreen, it'll be up. So you can go on there and you can look at other people's images and listen to live critiques and watch judges draw on the image of what to do. You can also, as part of that process, we take some of the images after that judging and say, here's a few we're going to look at now. We're not going to tell you whose they are, and say, these didn't get an award. And they're going to tell you why and what could have been done. So can you submit, enter the next round of competition? You'll be in the running for this, if that's what you aim for. And that's an interesting concept. I'm aiming to not get an award so I can get some feedback. But even if you put it in, you can ask for feedback as well, right? So you can actually say, I want specific feedback from a judge. So there's many ways. All you've got to do is become part of the Icon International Photography Awards and enter. All right, no worries. Yeah, quickly.
And then just to add to that quickly, if you are walking around and you see someone's badge and it says that they're a judge, you can also, maybe see if they have a minute or two just to answer some questions for you as well. So I'm happy to after this.
And there's a book over there, which is all the finalists. So everybody who got 80 or above is in that book. So that'll give you an indication of the standard required to win an award. But the whole purpose of the Icon Awards was to provide a platform of education, inspiration, and motivation and all those things. So the educational aspect, this is one part of that, but only one part. So let's have a look and see what we can learn, shall we? All right. First image is a couple of beautiful babies. And Kelly, let's kick it off with you. Tell us about this picture.
All right. As you said, a couple of beautiful babies. And I think that the photographer has tried to create, a beautiful sort of connection here between the two babies with the placement of the hands and the arms and wrapping them together as one. And it's got a very womb-like feel to it. As you would imagine, I have twins of my own, so I know what it actually feels like to have two babies inside of me growing. And the photographer's done a great job at trying to, wrap them together. The wrapping has been done beautifully. It's very neat. There's a couple of areas that could really improve this. Camera angle, for one, is probably the first thing that stands out for me. If you have a look at the bottom of the image there on the screens, for those of you that are here with us, the bottom half of the photograph looks to be closer to the camera. So you need to, when you're shooting from above like this, you need to make sure that you have the baby's heads slightly closer to the camera to make them more prominent and to make the bodies of the babies appear less larger than what they currently do. You can do that by either using some supports underneath the head and the shoulders of the babies to elevate them a little bit higher to help you get over, especially if you're not as tall as me. I know that that's often a challenge. But also the direction of light here is something that we're really struggling with. We have to make sure when we're photographing multiple subjects that when we position our light and we direct it, we have to make sure that it's flattering for both subjects, not just one. So in this instance, perhaps a light either coming directly from one side that is slightly elevated and then using a reflector from the other side, or using a light that is positioned a little bit higher above the baby's heads, coming down from the top of the frame across both babies. So that way you can create a more even direction of light. But I'm sure Michael's got some advice as well here.
Yeah, and Maker, in these types of images, there's always like a couple like bullseyes, like where it was just absolutely nailed. And for me, that little hand connection and hold, just like that's it. And I think that if you saw that as well, and of course posed it, that it can be so easy to get lost in that little triangle that's right there. And then as your eye begins to move about the frame, that's where we as judges really begin to look at the detail. So a little bit of the light on the left subject's ear goes in a little bit too strong. And I believe that's sort of to Kelly's point earlier about the lighting. And then the actual fabric that is going just under the subjects, the greenish fabric or grayish fabric, I think it needs to either be significantly more messy and more of it, or it needs to be a little bit straighter. Right now, if we were to remove the subjects, I feel like I would start making corrections there. And that's where, I think you can strengthen the image just a little bit more.
To that point that Michael's just made about that fabric, sometimes we have to think, is it adding to the composition? When we introduce different elements, different textures, different materials, different objects, how does it work to best frame the subject to draw you into those beautiful faces? And here I feel that the contrast between that dark fabric and the lighter fabric is just creating a little bit of a distraction. So when you've got beautiful subjects like this, make them the hero of the shot and remove everything else that doesn't draw your eye to that subject. So, even just removing that altogether, take a shot with it. If it doesn't work, if you look at the photo in the back of your screen and go, you know what? That's the first thing I see, remove it if it's not the main subject. But yeah, I feel like I think we're on the same page there. But I just want to say to the photographer, the skin tones are beautiful. Like what I'm looking at here, the skin is beautiful. I think you've done a really great job in terms of that color balance.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Michael. Let's have a look at the next one. We'll start with you, Michael.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for silhouettes. I try and kind of work them in anywhere that I can with a lot of my wedding clients. I've done a few maternity, and so I have experimented with this a little bit as well. And so, lovely start. I can't say anything about it. And by the way, as we're talking images, if you're in between that 75 to 79 range, that remember that puts you in a category of these images. You're selling these images. These are hanging in clients' homes. These are in albums. it can be easy to be discouraged looking at something that's in the high 70s. But that's one important thing to keep in mind. So I absolutely love the direction that the shot is going in. In terms of the silhouette, it begins to kind of fall apart ever so slightly on that right side, where you've got a little bit of lines coming through almost from like the mouth to the upper chest area, and then again from the belly down into the leg. And so I'm looking for a reason for this to be happening. Is this part of the story? Is this giving me a story in my mind to weave together in my imagination? And I'm very big. I love to seek out a story. I will forgive a flaw easily if there's a powerful, powerful story behind it. Here, that story isn't coming forward to me. And so I'm wondering if the subject could have been possibly either a little bit closer or further, or the light a little bit harder, so that the subject truly began to isolate, or so that those elements are removed from there. And that's my initial thought.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And whilst I'm with you, I love this. And I love the mystery that fabric between the camera and the subject creates. And it gives you that very soft, beautiful silhouette. A black and white could also create a little bit more impact here. But my advice would be to move that subject a little bit further away from that fabric, from that scrim, possibly put a little bit, by doing that, you create the distance between the fabric and the subject, which is going to allow a little bit more light to fall in front of the subject. And that's going to help you avoid some of those darker shadows on the shoulder and on the belly that do come quite close. They're there and they do create a bit of a distraction. We often talk about highlights being distracting and, drawing the eye away from some of those more important parts. But in this instance, those darker areas that are in the foreground of the subject are what sort of pull you away from that beautiful shape. Lifting the chin also and separating that from the shoulder will create a little bit more of a silhouette and profile of that beautiful face as well. You can still have the head tilted down, but the way that you kind of angle the shoulders and position the chin, create a little bit of separation. It's going to be more flattering and it's going to let more light pass through as well. So yeah, I'm definitely with you, and I think this has got so much potential, and I would love to see you continually experiment with something like this and even use some different fabrics for texture.
Excellent stuff, guys. Yep.
Yeah, I'll just add one other thing. If the intent is to make this kind of ghostly, and that was the intent maker, then it has to go super ghostly, and you have to distort it even more. But if not, then exactly as Kelly said, because if we look at the top of the head, I'm seeing detail in the hairs there. And again, if it was a complete bundle mess of hairs and they're all strung out everywhere, and that is that ghostly story, I would get it. So I think it's just, you have to make a decision of which way you want to go here.
Thank you. Let's have a look at the next one. You guys will need to move it.
All right. I mean, in today's world, what mother is not going to love this of their baby girl, especially if they're a big Barbie fan themselves? I do really love the creative concept here and the use of props, and even the pink headband and the pink wrap there. For me, we have to look at the subject again, and I will continually come back to this. When we bring different props and elements in, we have to look at how they can best make the subject stand out. And at the moment, that pink frame and the white text is more dominant than the actual subject. So we're going to look at the way that we position the baby in the box, perhaps lifting the baby up a little bit higher so it was slightly higher than the actual box, even though that's not how you see a Barbie in a box. But here we're looking at using something that is very, very well known, and to incorporate into a photo to create a theme. So my advice would be to kind of remove the idea in your head of what it's meant to look like and use it in a way that can help create a little bit more interest and a little bit more detail. And you can do that by lifting that baby up a little bit higher, directing the light more towards them, and then reducing some of the intensity of the brightness that's in that frame around the baby. And then when you're using, like a pink wrap and a pink headband that's going to match the outside box, try to get that color tone just right because it's slightly off. The pink in the headband's a little bit warmer than the cooler sort of more magenta pinks in the box as well. But there's a few color casts kind of coming off onto that white fabric in the background. So a little bit more control over the, not the white background, sorry, in the background. I'm talking about the curly textured felt around the edges of the box there. There's a lot of pink sort of fall off that's inconsistent. It's not throughout the entire wrap there. So yeah, there's a couple of things that you could do here. I think that you've done a nice job with the wrapping. The placement of the hands is lovely. However, to get that face up a little bit higher than the hands, just a little bit of a shift with the chin and lifting that up. And you can do that by adding more support at the back of the head. Now, I don't know if they can see me.
They can see you.
You guys can see me. You can all see me. Okay,
see
so I'm going to turn side on. Right, at the moment, we've got the hands kind of sitting here underneath the face. If we want to bring the face up, we need to support the back of the head. So not necessarily at the top of the head because that's going to tilt the chin forward. But if you put a support at the base of the head, that's going to help you bring the chin up and allow you to sit it on top of the hands so that they're not in front of the face.
Yeah, I think a lot of those little details I'm glad you discussed those because I was going to say all of that exactly, me not being a newborn photographer.
Of course you
But what I'll say is this, because this is almost a play on what I would see in a commercial shoot, then treat it as such. It's like, go look at what do other Barbie boxes look like. And they're going to be a little bit higher key. The light is going to be a little bit more even, such as where you have the sort of white background. There's a slightly sharper fall off in the light where I can almost see how the light has been kind of restricted. And another thing that is I do this constantly. I don't know if you guys do this. One of two things. When you are editing your image, take your image and either flip it upside down on your monitor or print, or just put a very heavy Gaussian blur on it temporarily, so that you can see where the highlights are and where the shadows are, and that is likely where the viewer's eye is going to go. So if you were to take this image and flip it upside down, if you look to the camera right little white portion of it, you would see that that is almost the brightest part, and that is immediately going to pull people's eyes. It's so, this happens to me all the time. I get lost in my own image. I'm sitting there, I edit it for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then I walk away, I see it, it's beautiful. I walk away, I come back to it later. I'm like, wait, what is all of this? And that break from seeing the image or flipping it upside down, the break as well helps. It can just absolutely change your perspective on the image. And I think that I can't say that there's anything that step I do on every single large print or competition print that I do.
Michael, you're talking about a practical way to look at, highlight, shadow that people may not always see. But what will happen when you do that a few times, you will be doing it in your mind without actually having to do it in terms of software and blurring. Or even another method is to slip it into, say, lab color and just look at the color channels and see where the colors are going. Mm-hmm. And you can see if there's a dominance of one color on one side that's dragging the eye as well. So but those techniques, you start off with them sort of in that more laborious way, but eventually you'll look at the picture and you, like the judges here, would look at that and instantly know where those highlights and shadows. So they're really good tips to help people find those areas.
And if you are here and you're not quite sure what we're talking about, my advice is to walk this wall, but don't get too close. I would say probably about 4 meters away from the wall. And, for those of you who aren't here, the gallery of images that are finalists that have been judged. Now, these are the cream of the crop. My advice is for you to walk along. You can do this, obviously, with the images that are online. You can do them making them smaller. But walk along and have a look at each image and see what catches your eye first. Because as judges, that's what we're looking at. What grabs our attention? What are we looking at? So as Michael said, you can blur it, you can, flip it upside down, you can zoom it, right out and make it really small on your screen to look at your own work. But another really good tip is to look at the images that have done really well and squint, take a look at what catches your eye and draws your attention in, because that's exactly what we're looking at as judges.
We'll move on to another one. Let's have a look at the next one.
Yeah. Again, I'm a sucker for dramatic lighting, and anytime you throw something like this in front of me, rather than the expected almost high key, I feel like sometimes genres get associated with certain types of lighting, and for makers to say, you know what, I'm going to go off in a different direction. I know you're expecting something light and fluffy and airy, and that's not this subject, and that is not me. And I love it when photographers do that. So that the lighting there absolutely strikes me. One of the first things that I would probably look at improving a little bit is a little bit more smoothness of the transition of the light between the belly going all the way up to the face. If you just focus on the face and the upper chest, that light is absolutely gorgeous. I love the texture. I love the fact that you're giving me shadows, and that anytime you give me light, shadow, and you let my eye kind of bobble around there, I absolutely love that. It feels that when we get down to the belly section, it becomes a little bit too hot there, and it kind of flattens, almost grays out, where it no longer matches the skin tones that are up top. And I think that is absolutely amazing. The hair, as it's blowing out, I love the dynamic motion of it, because we're in a still world, but anytime you can make somebody feel the motion and emotion, that is really truly amazing. The only real thing that I would say there is the hairs that are up top. They don't exactly match from the bottom, like of the shoulder blade. I absolutely love the way that arc is being created, and those few hairs up top, I don't know if that is doing it. I completely understand that this is one of those things where you are, but it was a fan and I didn't have control. And this is just one of those things where you're taking a number of shots until you get it just right.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I'm not going to point out any of the lighting, areas that Michael's already mentioned. I'll talk a little bit more about the posing here. And I am really drawn to that beautiful, soft expression on her face. And I love that it's a profile and that she's looking in towards the light there. I think you've done that beautifully. When we are doing a profile shot like this, we want to create as much separation between the face and the shoulder that's furthest from the camera as we can. So even like as Michael said, come in, move that hair off the shoulder, create a little bit more separation, come back, get a few more shots, try to get the motion of that hair just right. And then when it comes to photographing really dark fabric and dark skin, if we're going to use very dramatic lighting like that, we do have to be careful that some of the areas don't go missing in terms of the detail. So you can either use a very, subtle reflector to bounce a little bit of light back into the arm that's closest to the camera and this side of the belly. That could help in terms of creating a softer transition from that highlight to shadow. But another thing that I just want to mention here in terms of hand placement, we're losing the hand at the top of the belly. We can see the light catching the back of the hand, but we haven't got fingers. And then as that fabric at the wrist kind of starts and we're losing light there because it's furthest away from our light source, it starts to disappear. So it does look somewhat like a floating hand there. And then the hand at the bottom of the belly, we don't see what that's connected to either. So in terms of posing, my advice would be that top arm, to bring that hand back a little bit to create a bit of space. So instead of having it at the top of the belly where we're missing the fingers, bring that hand back around underneath the breast that's closest to the camera. Then you're going to open up the space. It's more flattering for females as well because it's going to show more of the beautiful curves of the body. And then with the hand at the bottom, get rid of it. You don't need it. Just have that arm go straight down the side of the body, have it resting on the thigh. Or switch the hands, put the hand in the front, down at the base of the belly, but don't have it down under the belly. Bring it back to the hip, create that space, and then have the top arm up. Hold this in front of my mouth for me, Michael. bottom hand down, bring the hand back to the hip, top hand up, but slightly turn the shoulders more towards the camera so you can see what that hand is connected to. But always get your model or your subject to relax, thank you, as much as you can so that their shoulders up aren't around their ears.
I don't know about you, but it's fascinating watching experts just talk about something that seems so easy to them. So easy to them. Okay, that's great. That's awesome, guys. Thank you. We'll move on to another one. We'll see if we can get another one in. Yep. Let's have a look at this one. I'm gonna start with Michael. And maybe just a quick couple of comments each about this one.
Yeah. So, who's not a sucker for sleeping babies? I have a 4-year-old myself, so anytime he's asleep, all the way from when he was a baby, that was a wonderful time. So this just the sleeping.
Sometime in the future he's going to look at this and hear this.
Yeah. We'll see about that, but he'll probably be a teenager and asleep himself at that point, so that'll be fine. I love you. It's so easy to get lost in that sweetness because we all, you say as soon as the image comes around, you say "aw," right? And so awe is wonderful. And again, the mom would absolutely adore this shot, and you could do almost anything you want to it, and tell me that some mom is not going to love anything about it. Some really minor things to start to improve on. And I don't know if it's the screen. I've got a little white spot that is sort of on the camera left off of the arm. That could just be here. It's just here. It's just the screen. Okay. So the fabric itself, which is covering the baby, it again needs to, I think, either make something more messy or more clean. In this case, I'm looking at this beautiful smooth background, and then I get to the subject, and then all of a sudden this fabric, which kind of feels a little bit more like an afterthought, like, oh yeah, let's put this over it and cover. So the hard creases in there, smooth it out, possibly tighten it, or show a little bit more. The one other point before I pass this off to Kelly is I'm looking at the skin tones a little bit between the face and the shoulder, and I understand. Believe it or not, I have done a couple of newborn sessions. And I learned that you should not have the AC turned on at 65 degrees. Apparently, that's not advisable because then they cry and pee everywhere. But the one thing that I noticed that I don't have an issue with on adult subjects as much is that difference in skin tone. But in babies, I was so surprised to see, wow, like the skin, it's like it from the hand to the forearm, we have like two completely different colors. And so keeping that in mind and evening it out, I think would help significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with those points. One thing that really stands out for me here, actually, let me start with by saying this baby looks super comfortable, right? Like it's just posed so naturally. So I think you've done a really great job there in terms of that posing, just bringing that elbow down a little bit so that we can see more of the hand. Get your safe shot, come in, and then pull that elbow and that hand out so that we can see what's connected to that arm and hand that's disappearing underneath the head there. The camera angle itself, maybe just a little bit of more of a step to your left, and just tilting and shifting your camera back towards your right so that we're seeing more of the baby's body and we're not cropping through that bottom leg there in the bottom right-hand corner. When you are tilting your camera as well in terms of rotating it, when we rotate like this on an angle, we can make that baby look like it's on a slope and it's going to slide off. So if you rotate your camera to position that baby a little bit more balanced within the bottom of the frame, give it a nice base so that it looks like it's sitting on a nice solid surface and it's not going to go anywhere. That all happens in camera. The other thing that will do is eliminate that large space, that large amount of fabric that is in the foreground in that bottom left-hand corner there. We do want to try and fill the frame as much as we can with the subject. So playing around with your camera in terms of the way that you rotate it, the way that you shift the camera up and down, and the way that you shift your camera to the left and right as well is really going to help you. The other thing with those skin tones, when we look at that difference, Tony mentioned it before, in terms of turning something into, say, black and white, looking at it there, looking at the tonal range. you'll find that the skin tones on the face are going to be a little bit darker. And that's because the baby's chin is coming down away from the light. So in post, you want to lift that up a little bit more. So just a curves adjustment, lighten those red areas a bit more, and you'll start to get a little bit more of an even tonal range there from the face to the body.
One of the things I hope the audience is taking away, both here and online, is that we could literally have one image and sit here for an hour, and these two amazing photographers could go into more and more detail about the subtleties. And that's the difference. When we talk about that 75, 79 going up into an 80, or just having your images, even if you don't enter competition, having your images that people just sort of sit and linger longer over. I like that, linger longer over. It's that subtle differences. And that's where the difference between a photographer of this standing and somebody who's still trying to get there. So you just got to take on board that it's in the little things you can make the biggest difference. We're gonna finish there. I'm happy for you to say one or two quick things, but we will close it.
Yeah, just one final point with all of this everything that we've said and all of the feedback that you get if you stop any of the judges or if you have conversations about your images. Yeah, sure, we'll discuss that one image, but the aim is for you to hear the voices of the people that gave you feedback next time. So you're in this pose, you're about to take the shot, and then you say, okay, wait, hang on a second, let me just shift my camera. And that's what started happening to me after a few years, when finally I got over my ego of saying, no, I'm really good, and then nothing ever scored above 80. I was about to take a number of images at a wedding, and then all of a sudden I heard it's like, no, don't include that part. That's completely not necessary. And I started hearing the voices of the judges and all the folks that gave me feedback. So that's the part that you should really, I think, try and take away, is to remember the voices later when you're actually shooting, because that's when it pays off.
I could just see all these people saying, do you know Michael Novo? No, who's he? You know, the judge who always hears voices. We're going to close. This one's been a bit longer than some of the others, but before we close, I think it would be valuable, Kelly, in a shortened version, if you could just address safety around newborns and maternity. Just a couple of little haiku versions of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, because, I mean, when we look at a photo like this, the baby looks comfortable, it looks safe. I mentioned this for those of you that are in the audience that were at my class yesterday. Safety is really important, not just to make sure that the baby is safe because they're still developing at such a rapid rate, but to also keep them happy and content. That's going to make your job easier as a photographer. The safer you make that baby, the more content you make them in terms of the comfort, the happier they're going to be, the easier your shoot is. So when we remove the idea of going into a session focused on, I'm going to get this shot and I'm going to get that shot and I'm going to do this, and we bring it back to, right, let's focus our attention on that baby. Let's make that baby as comfortable as they possibly can. Let's ensure that they are safe, they're positioned properly, carefully at all times. It's going to help you refine everything that you do. When you focus on the baby, it slows you down. When you slow down, your energy levels change. You become more aware of certain things, because the more you work with a baby that's unsettled, distressed, and you're trying to force it into a pose, there's a friction that you're creating between you and your subject. And it's just going to be a constant uphill battle. So think of it in a way of making your job easier. And you will, I can tell you, I can guarantee it, you'll notice a massive shift in your work almost instantly when you start to do that. Plus, you're going to come out of your sessions feeling like you've done a really good job. And then, more importantly, at the end of it, your clients are going to love you because you've made them feel like their baby is 100% your priority in terms of their safety, and you've created a beautiful, memorable experience for them.
Thank you, Kelly. You know, I couldn't emphasize enough that if you found some value here, that you should keep an eye on both of these amazing people, because both with their own specialties have plenty to offer, and I'm sure you've seen it in a short space of time. Like I feel guilty that we're going to close this now because we could spend all day. Kelly, obviously most people know what Kelly's background is. Michael, with his skill sets, etc. And we saw in the judging too, you know, that Michael, just such a great depth of technique and craft, and also the softer side of Michael. And let's face it, anyone who hears voices has got plenty to teach us.
I've never been able to get into one of Kelly's workshops, so instead I clawed my way here to just be able to sit next to her and just listen to her speak.
All right,
That's
we're gonna close it there. We want to thank B&H for their support of what we're doing here in the program, and also Critiq, that's without a U and an E, who are behind us as well. Don't forget to have a look at the Icon Photography Awards website, because through the year there'll be a point of time in the second half of the year where online submissions open, and somebody asked about, can I submit for critiques? That's your starting point. Online submissions, they'll be open and then they close. Then there'll be some judging done online. You can get your results and your critiques if you ask for it in your own personal critique. And then we go into the physical print, which is when the finals are going to be the experience of the finals. Those photographers or makers who got in the top 10 will be offered the opportunity. And this year, I think it was something like 98% of images that were qualified for the finals went on and printed and came into the finals. And there, of course, we then have the physical print judging, which you were able to see over the weekend, and of course, this session here. So I hope you've enjoyed yourself. I've certainly learned a lot. We're going to be back in about 10, say 15 minutes. We're going to be talking about, let's have a look what we're talking about next. We'll be doing children and teenager animals and pets. Kelly, Michael, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.